Welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. I'm Lonnie Goldsmith, the editor of TCG Folk. This week I talk with musician Adi Yeshaya. We talk about what led the Israeli-born musician to his career on the stage, the October 16th Adi Yeshaya Big Band show at the Dakota, and we drop the names of some unbelievable artists that he's worked with on this week's Who the Folk podcast. But before we hear from Adi, be sure to check out the refreshed TCG Folk merch store with newly designed stickers, shirts, hats, and tote bags that help support our mission and help you look fun and stylish. Check it out at tcgfolk.com/store. Adi Yeshaya, welcome to the Who the Folk podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Lonnie.
It's a pleasure to talk to you. You will be performing next week, as people are listening to this, Monday, October 16th at the Dakota with your big band, featuring Jennifer Grimm as the vocalist. What is performing at the Dakota like? I know what it's like to be a spectator there, to be in the audience. It's such a great venue for jazz music. What's it like to perform there?
Well, actually, I started performing at the Old Dakota in St. Paul. I moved here in 1988, and I started playing there around 90.
Okay.
And so when they opened the new venue, the whole premise of the club changed from primarily jazz to any kind of musical entertainment. And the production and the sound and the way the place is run is really upscale. It's really pleasure playing there, and you treated very well.
That's great. I mean, and I've seen some jazz, and I've seen some, I wouldn't call it rock and roll, but certainly more like just contemporary acoustic music. You know, it's a variety of shows there, which is cool, and it is such a fun venue to get to play. So one of the things I found most fascinating about this particular show is a 12-piece band. That is a really small stage. How are you getting 12
It's interesting
pieces
because
on that stage?
I was wondering, actually this band, let me go back a little bit.
Okay, please.
This was our 30th 30-year reunion. The band actually started in 91.
Okay.
And between 92 and 94, we had a regular gig at the Dakota in St. Paul.
Okay.
The stage was a lot smaller, so we had only three-piece rhythm section, which helps. It's like piano, bass, and drums.
Okay.
And then we have 9 horns. 5 of them were on stage, and the 4 saxes, which was the front row, were on the floor. Debbie Duncan was our singer back then.
Okay.
She was on the floor too, so it wasn't the most comfortable situation, but it worked really well. The sound was good, and the band was fantastic.
Yeah.
As I said, we played there until 94, and the band did a few things after that, but for the most part it was dormant for all that time. And especially after Debbie passed away, Debbie and I worked together a lot, so when she passed away I really lost interest. About a year ago, I got a call from Jennifer Grimm to work on a musical project for a symphony orchestra.
Oh.
And the collaboration really started opening all sorts of possibilities and ideas, and at some point it clicked for me, and I said, how would you like for me to put the band back together and to try to resurrect a lot of the old players that some of them are active and some are not, and see if we can just put it back where it was, and you'll sing some of Debbie's old songs, and I'll do some new arrangements. She said, I love it, let's do it. So we did a gig at Crooner's last month.
Oh, sure.
It was fantastic. I mean, people came, what what I was really surprised by, it's like a lot of the people that used to come and see us at the Dakota in the 90s showed up.
Wow.
And some new audience, and so it was a sign. It was like, okay, this must go on, you know.
Yeah.
So I talked to Lowell at the Dakota, and he was really gracious to open the doors for us again, and I hope to do more. Yeah.
Well, it feels something like sort of very, because of the type of music jazz can be, there's sort of, it can feel very improvisational a lot, at least as an audience member listening to it who knows nothing about music. I know what I like, I know what I don't like, and listening to it, there's sort of, it can feel like a very improvisational vibe to it. Did it sort of just all come back together like you hadn't been apart that long? Did it feel like that getting back on stage with the group?
It felt like this right away, and I'll tell you, I mean, jazz music is highly improvisational.
Yeah.
But when you have a big band, it's also highly arranged. So you have all the parts written,
Right.
and then there's a lot of spots where it's open for improvisation. You need real specialized musicians to be able to pull something like that, and the Twin Cities are a really great bed for world-class musicians.
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate to have these individuals in the band, because it's like each and every one of them is like the top in the field, you know.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to feel so fortunate to get to work with such a collection of talent.
I feel very fortunate. Yeah.
That's amazing. Interesting. You talked about Jennifer reaching out to you for a project with an orchestra. Jazz. I mean, I guess the point where they come together is sort of the where you talked about jazz being highly arranged, while also being improvisational. I would think orchestration is also highly arranged. Is that sort of where they come together? Because they otherwise seem very, very different.
When I discovered arranging, I didn't even think I liked jazz.
Really?
Yeah. It was in the early 70s in Israel, and I was 14 years old and discovered what arranging was, and I go, this is what I'm going to be doing. Jazz arrived later.
Really?
Yes.
Fascinating.
Yeah. I wanted to write for orchestras, I wanted to arrange, but the way I really discovered the connection between jazz and arranging was when I was actually listening. It started with listening to Sinatra, and later on to Quincy Jones, and all these bands that were so tight and so arranged, for that matter, but harmonically and melodically, they really opened a style of music that was not familiar to me. With that, I became more interested in the actual improvisational part of it. So as a player, I developed that. As a writer, I was doing the arranging.
Right.
And, at some point, it all came together.
It seems like it'd be sort of like two different parts of your brain, not competing, but like working together in sort of that way, because it just seems like from the outside so different.
You nailed it. Because what's happening, I play a fair amount of jazz in a small group setting. And, what we really play is well-known standard tunes from 40s and 50s,
Sure.
Things that were famous in movies and Broadway shows and stuff. When I play situations like this, I actually dislike reading. Yeah, because I write music all the time.
Yeah.
I'm looking at music through a microscope all the time. It's
Right.
like dynamics, blend, balance, sound. But when I play jazz, I want a completely different kind of experience. And what I find is that people will bring me charts and I go, okay, whatever. Yeah, I'll play the tune. So
It's fascinating. How do you switch off those two sides? Like,
No, they live together.
Do they? Okay.
Yeah, they live together because when you arrange, you compose music.
Yeah.
When you improvise, you compose music. So the difference is what you do with, with a plan,
Yeah.
and what you do spontaneously. But it's the same craft.
When you're playing spontaneously, how many moves ahead are you thinking? Because there's got to be some sort of road, even very general roadmap, I would think, right?
I'll tell you this: it's really hard to get you into that mindset. But I'll tell you that if you asked me this question 30 years ago, you would get a completely different answer. I can only answer genuinely by how it is right now. And the way it is right now is I'm not thinking. If I start thinking, I'm screwed. No, I'm serious.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is it about you as a musician, as an artist, that has changed that answer from 30 years ago?
It was closer to school. It was really understanding the structure and doing a lot of analysis while you work. You think about what you're using and in what way. So this line needs to resolve, so I'm going to plan in the next measure to go in this direction. And that doesn't exist anymore.
Really?
We're speaking a language.
Yeah.
Did you stop for a second and think about the grammar behind and the spelling of what you're saying? No.
Not always.
It's a language.
Yeah. Interesting. So you mentioned growing up in Israel and you found arranging. What was your entry to music?
I had two brothers that were 11 years older than me.
Okay.
Unfortunately, they both gone now. But they both played accordion. That was the instrument in the house. And I always loved when the accordion was set on the sofa and I was moving, moving the, what do you call that? The air chamber. And creating sounds. So I was creating sounds with the accordion, just opening and closing. And one day, one of my brothers came over and said, instead of doing all that, let me teach you a song. That's how I started.
Okay.
He taught me a song, and I started taking lessons. And for 2 years, I was really in trouble because my teacher always complained to my parents that I'm not working on reading. I always play everything by ear. And I'm not reading well because I played everything from memory. So I thought I was in trouble, and there was always that threat that, if you're not going to really work on this, maybe stop taking lessons. Why do you need lessons? And I didn't want to stop.
Right.
So that was the introduction into music. I started studying when I was 9, and I was playing songs by the radio, but I was always hearing organ, and I wanted to play organ so bad. And at some point, my parents just came and bought me an organ, and I went to a different conservatorium and started working on this. And I think there they realized my potential with ear work, and they started forming these bands, and I played in these bands and was kind of a happy camper. My parents felt like I'm not progressing, and then I was playing music, and I was playing along with the radio, with Top 40, and learn all these different parts, and through that I got to be in a situation where an arranger was involved, and I was floored. The first time we actually got to play arrangements, I was just like, this is it. I found it. That's what I wanted to do.
So, I guess for people listening who may not know, what are arrangements?
Anything that a tune goes through from the point it's conceived by a melody and a simple guitar accompaniment to the final product on the radio.
Okay.
So you can call it production, but production is relatively new term, while arranging was what people like Nelson Riddle did for Frank Sinatra.
Okay.
Okay, you like this tune? Okay, we'll record it, and suddenly there's an orchestra and parts and introductions and passages and key changes and counter lines by the orchestras and certain hits, and so
That's what arranging is.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I think of, it's production, like the producer, the mixing, producing, final product comes out on the radio. That's
Yeah.
sort of what but again, very layman's term, very, 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 from a layman's perspective.
Yeah, so technically what I do is produce.
Okay.
As far as my identity, I kind of stuck to arranging, and by doing this, I a lot of times work with other producers
Okay.
that they can do as much as they can do, but for more specialized part, if they want to add strings or horns or things like this, they call me.
Oh, cool.
Other kind of projects where I arrange it from the ground, so it's more like production these days.
Do you have a preference whether they bring you in for a specialized piece or at the ground level to sort of do it all?
I like both kind of thing. It's like I like what I do. For a while I thought, oh, if I had a chance to produce it, I would do it different, and then the horns will work different. I don't feel like this anymore, because I feel like I would much rather build from the ground things that I'm totally committed musically.
Sure.
And give service to a situation where, I know how to do that, so hire me for that and and do the rest,
Yeah. I would have to think it's. I mean, you've worked with so many greats in music. I mean, you said before we started recording, you look really great on paper. Well, the names on paper that you've worked with, Prince, Whitney Houston, Aretha Franklin, Lena Horne, Burt Bacharach, yeah, those are some pretty great names.
Mm-hmm.
How do you when somebody like Prince were to call you up, somebody
Mm-hmm.
of any of those people's stature call you up and say, hey, love to work with you, what's your, I guess, how do you step in and work in those roles? How does that work for you?
Well, if you look at the circumstances in each one of these situations, it's all very, very different. People always mention connections. You have to have connections. I don't have connections. I met people along the line. It's
Right.
like I worked with somebody, they liked what I did, and the next thing you know, they passed my name to somebody.
Right.
So it was more like that. Prince never called me and never wrote to me. But the way it happened, he worked with Claire Fisher, which is was a very, very respected jazz arranger, composer out in LA, and Claire Fisher did all these string writing. When Claire passed away, Michael Nelson, that is a trombone player in town that was working as the horn arranger for Prince for 30 years before that, forwarded to me a text that he got from Prince looking for a string arranger to continue the Claire Fisher legacy. And I get this, and I'm a big Claire Fisher fan.
Yeah.
And I'm going, Michael, why did you pass it to me? And he says, because I think you can do it. I said, come on, these are big shoes. He says, you can do it. And he sent me a track and says, okay, we want to put together a session for next Monday. Can you do it? I said, yeah, I can do it. So that's how it started. Yeah.
Drop everything and...
Literally, yeah.
So, I guess, what's it like you don't meet with, you don't really know firsthand, like, you don't know from the artist itself. You don't talk to Prince, you don't know exactly what you want, but you sort of have a general idea of the vibe he's going for that you're trying to continue.
Yeah, that's a great question, because this is always the case. Like, I'm going to take it back a second to
Sure.
My work with Whitney Houston. I worked with not with, but I worked for Whitney Houston 5 years before I got to meet her. You know, the way it, the way it developed. There was a really good friend of mine by the name of Michael Baker. I mean, we were not friends back then. He got my number from a mutual friend. Michael is a drummer and was a new musical director for Whitney Houston in the late 90s. At some point, because he lived in town, he decided to reach out and find out who in town does this kind of work, because otherwise we'll have to hop on the plane to LA or New York every time she needs to do something.
Right.
So we did one project, was one song that apparently he liked and it went really well, and he called me for another project, and I not knowingly I became like the everything live arranger for Whitney Houston.
Okay.
Never did any recordings with her, but everything she done live, which is tours, TV appearances, concerts, everything, for 11 years until she passed away. But anyway, when he first called me, he came over for me to play the arrangement that I worked on. And back then it was like I had to actually play. So Michael was, okay, there's a place there that you have a chord that I'm not sure about. I said, okay, is this chord? No, keep going. Oh yeah, that one. This is not a Whitney chord. I said, okay, what's a Whitney chord? Well, I don't know how to tell you this, but I'm going to sing her part, and he sings her part, and I said, is it this chord? He said, no. I said, this is closer, but there's one note that really, how about this one? There you go. Okay, that's the one. So that was the process that we were working like at the beginning, and then I was doing all these orchestrations and things. Everything turned out really good, and there was a point where I said, okay, Michael, what am I doing on this one? He said, do your thing. Eventually he understood that, okay, now I got her sound.
Okay.
The same process was with with everybody else I was working with. So,
but I mean, at some awfully intense direction, do your thing. You're working with Whitney. You just do your thing for Whitney. It's fine.
Well, of course, my thing was all right. Now you get the groove. You understand the sound. You understand all the parameters, and go to work.
God, that is wild. You think a kid growing up in Israel all those years ago would be doing this and working with these kinds of luminaries now?
Listen, when I started working with celebrities in Israel, I thought I was on top of the world.
Yeah.
Seriously. And to this day, I have so much admiration for some of the music makers of my time back then, that every once in a while I go, oh, I wish this guy would work with me. I wish, and I'm thinking, man, Burt Bacharach called you. What do you wish?
Right. Like, what could you want?
Yeah, so...
What was it that brought you to the States and to Minnesota?
To the States, I went to study at Berkeley.
Okay.
And to Minnesota, I met my wife at the time in Boston. And we were married for 31 years.
Okay.
But we moved to Minnesota because she lived here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you have taught around the community. You've obviously worked with some of the great performers in the community, and it is a great musical community. Like you mentioned, it's so many, and I think people who aren't necessarily in the musical community here don't quite realize just how great a musical community it is.
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah.
Is there I mean, like we've talked about some of the greats, we've mentioned some of the names, but is there like a bucket list artist of like, this is somebody I would love to work with and for before I finish up?
It's not so much a bucket list of artists as much as certain ensembles I would love to write for. The VDR in Germany is a very famous big band and orchestra kind of. And a lot of my friends work with this organization, like the Petersons recently did a project with them. There's another orchestra like this in Amsterdam, the famous Metropole Orchestra. Okay. So things like that.
Okay. And it's fascinating to me, just as somebody, again, totally on the outside of music and understanding the process, but just the range of like big time, like super well known pop musicians, but also, you know, the maybe not as popular, but certainly within the genre, well known musicians that you've had the opportunity to work with. It's pretty fascinating.
Well, again, I talked to you earlier about the circumstances for each one of these projects. I mentioned Michael Baker, and I want to mention him again because he passed away recently, and we became really, really close friends for a long time. So many of the names that you mentioned, not so many, but some of the names that you mentioned, I got to them through him because I was working with Whitney through Michael, and then he got a call to do some work with Aretha, and he dragged me as an arranger, and then the same thing with Burt Bacharach later on.
I would imagine he didn't drag you kicking and screaming or anything to work with.
No, I didn't mean drag me. Just,
I know. But no, I mean, it's so important. It really is. It's not just who you know, but like you've done good work and people notice that, and that's how you get mentioned to other people, and that's how you build a career in a lot of fields.
We didn't mention anything I screwed up yet. There are plenty.
We don't have to do that.
Okay.
We don't have to do that. We're gonna keep it positive.
All right.
Well, Adi, very exciting show coming up at the Dakota. We will have links in the show notes for people to buy tickets. It is next Monday, but before we let you go, last couple questions we always end on. First, what is your favorite Jewish holiday?
Oh, I love them all. Let's see. My favorite, Hanukkah.
Sure.
It's around my birthday. Candles. I always loved Hanukkah.
Yeah. What's your favorite Jewish food?
Oh, that's a good one. My parents were from Bulgaria.
Oh.
So the slant of Jewish food that I knew was more from a Sephardic kitchen. Okay. And let's see. Oh, there's so many great things, Okay, one thing. There are special leek patties that my mom used to make that are fantastic, and I managed to get the recipe from her before she passed, so I'm a happy camper. I can make those now.
Can you? Did they taste the same, or was there some?
Very, very much the same.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, fantastic. Adi Yeshaya, thank you so much for joining me, and best of luck with the show next week.
Thank you so much, Lonnie.
The Who the Folk podcast is a part of the Jew Folk Podcast Network and a product of Jew Folk Inc. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you have suggestions for other podcast guests, please email them to me at editor@tcjewfolk.com. For our other shows, check out tcjewfolk.com/podcast.